My dad cut me off for refusing to obey my stepmom, and at my sister's wedding, he publicly called me a disgrace. So, I made them regret everything. I got a wedding invitation from my younger sister, Claire. Yes, that Claire, the golden child, the apple of my dad and stepmom's eye. The one I hadn't spoken to since cutting off the whole toxic mess that is my family. I mean, the sheer audacity, right? 7 years of nothing. No calls, no texts, no, hey, how's life? And suddenly I'm invited to this big fancy wedding. It wasn't just the invitation though. There was a handwritten note tucked inside. Claire's handwriting unmistakable. She wrote that she missed me and wanted to fix things. I stared at it for a long time, trying to figure out if this was some kind of prank. Like, was she serious? After everything that happened, after how they treated me, now she wanted me back in the fold? For context, let me rewind a bit. Our mom passed away when I was 15 and Claire was 12. It wrecked us, as you can imagine. But while I was still trying to process my grief, my dad was out there moving on. A year later, he remarried, and in came Denise, the stepmom from hell. From day one, she had this unspoken mission to erase every trace of my mom. Family photos? Gone. My mom's favorite decor? Packed up and thrown out. I was devastated. But Claire? She clung to Denise like she was some kind of savior. I couldn't blame her. She was just a kid, and she needed someone. But me? I couldn't stand Denise or the way she controlled everything. Things got worse as we got older. By the time I went to college, Dad refused to help me financially. His reasoning? I needed to man up and learn responsibility. Meanwhile, he was showering Claire with everything. College tuition, a brand new apartment, even a car, all paid for without a second thought. I was juggling part-time jobs, barely scraping by, and trying to build an event planning business from scratch. Denise, of course, dismissed it as playing around, while Claire was the star of the family, excelling in school and apparently deserving of all their support. Eventually, I had enough. After years of feeling like an outsider in my own family, I cut ties. No dramatic confrontation, no big fallout, just silence. I stopped calling, stopped visiting, and focused on building my life. I threw myself into my work, and honestly, I thrived. My business grew beyond anything I ever imagined, and I was finally in a place where I didn't need anyone. Not Dad, not Denise, not Claire. Which brings us back to the wedding invitation. At first, I wanted to toss it in the trash. Why should I care? They didn't care about me when I was struggling to get through school, when I was scraping together enough money to buy groceries, when I needed a family. But something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the note from Claire. I couldn't tell if she was genuine, or if this was just another one of Denise's manipulations. Either way, I decided to go. If nothing else, I figured I could show up, see how things played out, and leave if it got too unbearable. Here's the thing, I wasn't planning to go empty-handed. Despite the years of animosity, I still wanted to do something nice for Claire. I offered to help plan her wedding, give her the full service from my company at a massive discount. She politely declined, saying Denise had already taken care of everything. That stung a little. Not gonna lie, but hey, I'd done my part. I'd extended the olive branch. The ball was in their court, so there I was prepping myself for the big day. I knew walking into that venue would stir up a lot of old wounds, but I convinced myself it was worth it. Maybe Claire was sincere. Maybe this was her way of reaching out, of trying to make amends. I didn't have high expectations, but I held on to a sliver of hope. The night before the wedding, I couldn't sleep. Memories of the past kept flooding back. Holidays, where I sat on the sidelines while Claire got all the attention. Conversations where Denise belittled me in front of Dad. Moments when I realized I wasn't part of the family anymore. I told myself it didn't matter. I was going to the wedding for Claire, not them. And if things went south, I could always leave. I had nothing to prove to anyone. The next morning, I put on my best suit, got in my car, and drove to the venue. I arrived early because, well, that's just how I am. I'm a planner, always have been. The place was breathtaking, high ceilings, lush flowers, the works. They had clearly spared no expense. As I walked through the doors, I felt a mix of nerves and unease. This was my first time seeing my family in almost a decade. Would they welcome me, ignore me, or tear me apart? I had no idea. When I spotted Claire, she looked radiant. She came up to me, gave me a warm hug, and thanked me for coming. For a moment I thought, okay, maybe this won't be so bad. But then I saw Denise. She was standing off to the side, watching me like a hawk. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and I could tell she wasn't happy I was there. "Welcome," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "Still running that little party business of yours?" I gritted my teeth and smiled back. "It's going well, thanks." She smirked, clearly unimpressed, and turned her attention to someone else. Classic Denise. I shook it off and found my seat. The ceremony was beautiful, I'll give them that. Claire looked genuinely happy, and for a while I forgot about all the tension, but deep down, I knew the peace wouldn't last. And for a while I forgot about all the tension, but deep down, I knew the peace wouldn't last. This was my family after all. Drama was inevitable. Walking into the reception hall, I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. It wasn't the venue, because, let's be real, the place was stunning. The chandeliers sparkled like something out of a magazine. The tables were set with silverware, so polished I could see my reflection. And the floral arrangements looked like they'd been imported straight from heaven. No, the knot wasn't from the decor. It was from the inevitable. This was the first time I'd faced my family in nearly 7 years, and I knew what was coming. I made my way to the seating chart, scanning the list to find my name. The knot in my stomach turned into a sinking feeling when I found it. Table 14. I didn't need a map to know where that was. Weddings are practically a blueprint. Immediate family at the prime tables, then close friends, then extended family, and finally, the random stragglers. Table 14 was firmly in the "we don't care if you're here" zone. When I got there, I realized the insult wasn't subtle. My table mates were distant relatives I barely remembered. Aunt Lydia, who constantly mispronounced my name and reeked of mothballs, and Uncle Roger, who spent every family gathering droning on about his coin collection. The other 2 people at the table, I didn't even know who they were. Meanwhile, I spotted Claire's friends and Denise's family, all cozied up near the dance floor. Dad and Denise were front and center, naturally, basking in their self-appointed, very important person status. I couldn't help but laugh to myself. This was so on brand for them. 7 years of no contact, and they still managed to make it clear I was an afterthought. Fine. I didn't come here for the seating arrangement. I came for Claire, or so I told myself. I tried to keep my cool. I poured myself a glass of water, glanced around the room, and pretended I wasn't bothered. But then, the first landmine of the evening walked straight up to my table, Dad, and he was clearly drunk. Now, I knew this wasn't going to be a pleasant interaction. Dad doesn't do pleasant when he drinks. He does loud, rude, and completely inappropriate. True to form, he slammed his hand on the table, making Aunt Lydia jump. "What the hell are you doing here, Matt?" he slurred. "You weren't supposed to come." I stared at him, stunned. "I got an invitation," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. I even pulled it out of my pocket as proof. "Claire invited me," he snorted. "You should have stayed where you belong. You're just here to embarrass us, aren't you? Showing up with your little party business like it means something." His voice was getting louder, and I could feel eyes turning toward us. My face burned with a mix of anger and humiliation, but I kept quiet. Before I could respond, Denise appeared at his side, perfectly timed as always. "Matt," she said, her tone dripping with mock concern, "do you even make enough to buy that suit, or is it rented?" She gave me this smug little smirk, as if she'd delivered the punchline of the century. I looked at her, then back at Dad, and realized there was no point. You can't reason with people like them, especially not when they're drunk on booze and their own sense of superiority. So, I did the only thing I could do. I stood up, smoothed my suit, and said, "Excuse me." I walked away without another word. I didn't head straight for the door, though. I wanted to take a moment to clear my head, so I wandered outside to the patio. The night air was cool, and for a moment it felt like I could breathe again. But the voices from inside kept ringing in my ears. Embarrassment, little party business. God, they couldn't even let me exist without tearing me down. I leaned against the railing, staring out at the garden, trying to decide what to do next. Leave and never look back. Go back inside and pretend none of it bothered me? Neither option felt right. I was lost in thought when I heard the music start up inside. Full, upbeat, completely at odds with how I felt. That's when I realized I couldn't stay. I didn't owe these people anything, least of all my time or energy. I made my way back inside, sticking to the edges of the room to avoid being noticed. On my way out, I glanced over at the event staff. They were setting up for the next course, arranging plates with an efficiency I couldn't help but admire. Something about them felt familiar. I slowed down, watching them move, and that's when it hit me. I knew these people. These weren't just random staff members. They were my employees. My mind raced. My company had recently acquired a smaller event planning business, and it turned out this wedding was one of their gigs. No wonder the setup looked so polished. It was my team doing the work. I felt a strange mix of emotions, pride, surprise, and, most of all, a growing sense of irony. Claire and Denise had hired my company without even realizing it. Or maybe they did realize it and just didn't care. Either way, the power dynamics of the evening had just shifted dramatically, and for the first time all night, I felt like I had the upper hand. I stepped to the side and pulled out my phone, dialing my operations manager. When she answered, I kept my voice low. "Hey, quick question," I said. "This wedding, are we running it?" There was a pause, then, "Yeah, why?" I couldn't help but laugh. "No reason," I said, "just wanted to confirm." I hung up and stared back at the room. As I stood there still processing the fact that my team was running the wedding I had just been humiliated at, a realization hit me like a freight train. Everything, the flowers, the lighting, the perfectly timed dinner service, was being executed by my company. Claire and Denise had unknowingly or maybe knowingly hired me to bring their dream wedding to life. I couldn't decide whether to laugh or scream. Part of me wanted to storm back inside and announce, "Hey, guess what? All this, it's mine." But the more calculating part of me knew there was a better way to handle this. After all, Dad and Denise had gone out of their way to insult me, treating me like I didn't belong. If they didn't want me there, they sure as hell didn't deserve the work of my team. I dialed my operations manager again, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. "Hey, Kate," I said. My operations manager again, my hands shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. "Hey, Kate," I said, trying to sound calm. "Can you confirm the client's contract for tonight?" "Sure, Matt," she said, clearly puzzled. "Why?" "I'll explain later. Just tell me, does the contract include the usual termination clause?" Kate didn't even have to look it up. "Yep. Hostile or discriminatory behavior towards staff or management gives us the right to terminate services immediately." "Bingo." "Perfect," I said, a smile creeping onto my face. "We're invoking it. Start packing up." There was a pause on her end, and I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. "Wait, what happened?" she asked. "Is everything okay?" "Let's just say the client has made it clear they don't want me or us here," I replied. "I'll fill you in later, just trust me on this one." Kate didn't hesitate. "Got it. I'll handle it." I hung up, my heart pounding. This was it. If Dad and Denise thought they could treat me like trash and still enjoy the fruits of my labor, they were in for a rude awakening. I wasn't doing this out of spite, okay, maybe a little, but mostly because it felt like the right thing to do. I wasn't about to let them disrespect me while benefiting from my hard work. It wasn't personal. It was business. Back inside, the reception was in full swing. The music was playing, guests were mingling, and servers were bringing out the first course. Everything seemed perfect on the surface, but I knew the chaos was about to unfold. My team moved like a well-oiled machine, discreetly packing up equipment and supplies while keeping up appearances. Guests didn't notice anything at first, which was a testament to their professionalism. I stayed outside, watching from the patio as the plan unfolded. My team began taking down floral arrangements, rolling up table linens, and quietly clearing out decorations. It was like watching a magician make an entire room disappear without anyone realizing it. Denise might have been able to belittle me, but she couldn't touch the quality of my work or my employees. The first sign of trouble came when the lighting crew started dismantling the uplights around the room. A few guests noticed, pointing and whispering to each other, but no one said anything yet. Denise, of course, was too busy holding court at her table to realize what was happening. Dad was nowhere to be seen, probably off nursing another drink. As more and more decorations disappeared, the whispers grew louder. Finally, one of the servers walked over to Denise and said something to her. Her face went from smug to furious in a matter of seconds. She shot up from her chair and marched across the room, heels clicking like gunshots against the marble floor. I could hear her from the patio. "What's going on? Why are they taking everything down?" The server looked genuinely terrified. "I don't know, ma'am. You'll have to ask the event manager." That's when she spotted Kate, who was calmly directing the staff. Denise stormed over, her voice escalating with every step. "What is this? What the hell are you doing?" Kate didn't flinch. "We're following the terms of the contract, ma'am. Services are being terminated due to hostile behavior toward our management." Denise blinked. "What hostile behavior? Who even is your management?" Kate gestured toward the patio where I was standing. Denise turned, her eyes narrowing as she saw me. I gave her a small wave, my expression as neutral as possible. She stormed outside, her face red with rage. "You," she hissed, "you can't do this. This is Claire's wedding, and this is my company," I replied, my voice calm. "You made it clear earlier that you don't respect me or what I do, so why would you want my services?" Her jaw dropped. "You're doing this to punish me, to ruin Claire's wedding." I shook my head. "This isn't about Claire. It's about the way you and Dad treated me. You can't humiliate me and then expect me to provide top-tier service." "That's not how this works," Denise sputtered, trying to come up with a response. Before she could, Kate walked over and handed me a clipboard. "We're ready to roll out," she said. "Everything's packed," I nodded. "Thanks, Kate. Great work as always." Denise looked like she was about to explode, but I didn't stick around to find out. I handed her my lawyer's card and said, "If you have any questions about the contract, feel free to reach out to our legal team. Have a great evening." And with that, I walked away, leaving her standing there, speechless. The aftermath was even more chaotic than I anticipated. By the time my team rolled out, the reception hall was practically bare. The chandeliers still hung from the ceiling, but that was about it. No flowers, no table settings, no uplights. Guests were standing around, confused and whispering. Claire looked like she was on the verge of tears, and for a split second, I felt guilty. But then I reminded myself, this wasn't about her. This was about standing up for myself. The drive home from Claire's wedding should have been satisfying. I mean, I'd just orchestrated one of the most legendary mic drops of my life. But as the taillights of my team's trucks disappeared in my rearview mirror, I couldn't help but feel conflicted. This wasn't how I imagined the day going. Still, I knew I'd made the right call. For the first time in a long time, I stood up for myself. Not just as a business owner, but as a person. And while the night didn't go the way I'd hoped, I wasn't going to let that stop me from moving forward. This was just the beginning. I didn't have much time to dwell on it, though, because the fallout began almost immediately. The first inkling of chaos hit my phone about 20 minutes into my drive. Text messages, missed calls, voicemails, all flooding in. Denise predictably led the charge with a string of angry texts. They were long and rambling, filled with accusations that I'd ruined everything and destroyed Claire's big day out of spite. Each one was more dramatic than the last. "I can't believe you did this to Claire," she started. "You're a selfish, vindictive little boy who can't handle someone else being happy. You ruined this family's reputation. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is?" Oh, but she wasn't done. The messages went on, each one more unhinged than the last. She accused me of sabotaging the wedding out of jealousy, called me pathetic, and even demanded that I refund the entire cost of the event. Yes, refund. She genuinely believed I should pay her back for the services my company had already provided, as if she had some moral high ground to stand on. "You've embarrassed this entire family," she continued. "Do you know what people are saying about us now? I should have known better than to trust you with anything important. You are a failure, Matt, and you always will be." The audacity was almost laughable. I didn't respond and just muted her number. She wasn't worth my energy. Dad wasn't far behind. His voicemails were less coherent, but just as nasty. "I'll spare you the details, but let's just say the phrase is selfish brat, and I'll sue your ass" featured prominently. He even threatened to call the cops at one point, which honestly made me laugh. Call the cops for what? Breaching a contract he didn't even know existed? Good luck with that. The most surprising message, though, came from Claire. I'd expected anger from her, too, but when I finally read her text, it wasn't what I anticipated. "Why would you do this to me?" she wrote. "I thought you came to support me. I didn't think you'd ruin my wedding." Oof. That one hit harder than I expected. It wasn't like Denise's venom or Dad's drunken tirades. This felt like genuine hurt. Claire and I hadn't been close in years, but I could still hear the pain in her words. I could tell she genuinely didn't understand why I'd made the decision I did, and honestly, I didn't blame her. Claire had always been caught in the middle of this mess. Denise had her claws in her from a young age, and Dad wasn't exactly the kind of parent who encouraged independent thought. Claire had grown up in the same toxic environment I'd escaped from, but instead of fighting it, she'd adapted to it. I wanted to respond to her, to explain my side, but I wasn't sure it would make a difference. For a second, I wondered if I'd made a mistake, but then I remembered why I'd made the call in the first place. The next morning, the situation escalated. Denise, true to form, couldn't let it go. She started calling people, family members, friends, anyone who would listen, and spinning the story in her favor. By noon, I'd already received texts from 2 aunts and a cousin, all asking me to explain what really happened. To save myself from repeating the same thing over and over, I sent out a blanket text to the handful of relatives I still semi-trusted. Long story short, I was insulted, disrespected, and treated like an outsider. So I terminated my company's services per the terms of the contract. If you have questions, ask Denise. If you want the truth, ask the venue staff. I'm done defending myself. One of my aunts responded almost immediately. "Good for you," she wrote. "We saw how Denise treated you at Thanksgiving 5 years ago. She's always been awful to you. I'm just sorry Claire got caught in the middle. Her support caught me off guard. I'd spent so many years assuming the entire family had written me off, that I hadn't even considered the possibility that some of them might be on my side. It was a small comfort in the middle of a storm. Then came the unexpected fallout from the guests. By the afternoon, I started getting emails and inquiries, business inquiries. Apparently, word had spread among some of the wedding attendees about what had happened, and a few of them were impressed with how my team had handled the situation. One woman, who I vaguely remembered as a family friend of Claire's in-laws, reached out to say she admired the professionalism of my staff. "I heard what happened," she wrote, "and I just wanted to say, your team handled everything with incredible grace. It was clear the issue wasn't with your company, but with the family. I'm hosting a charity gala in a few months and would love to work with you if you're available. Talk about a silver lining." I responded immediately, thanking her for her kind words and setting up a time to discuss the event. Within a few hours, I'd received 3 more similar emails from other guests. It was surreal. The same wedding I'd been accused of ruining was now turning into free publicity for my business. Denise's attempts to humiliate me had backfired spectacularly. Of course, Denise wasn't done. By evening, she'd escalated her campaign against me to the digital realm. I discovered she'd left a scathing review about my company online, accusing us of being unprofessional and unreliable. The review was filled with outright lies, claiming we'd arrived late, provided poor service, and abandoned the event without warning. Thankfully, I was prepared for this. I contacted my lawyer immediately, and within hours, we'd sent Denise a cease and desist letter, warning her that any further false statements would be treated as defamation. The review was removed the next day, and as far as I know, she hasn't tried to post anything else since. Denise had apparently decided to escalate her entitled tantrum to new heights. The next morning, while I was reviewing my emails, I got a call from my lawyer. "You're gonna love this one," she started, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Claire's family is threatening to sue you for breach of contract." I actually laughed out loud. "You're kidding," I said. "On what grounds?" "They're claiming you abandoned the event and caused irreparable damage to Claire's wedding," my lawyer replied. "They're demanding a full refund and additional damages for emotional distress." The absurdity of it almost made me spit out my coffee. Emotional distress? Because I enforced a clause they agreed to? That's rich, my lawyer chuckled. "Don't worry, Matt. This is nothing more than a scare tactic." Their lawyer, if you can even call him that, sent a laughably vague letter with no specifics. I'll draft a response, but they don't have a leg to stand on. A few days later, Denise's attempt at a lawsuit reached its next ridiculous stage. Their lawyer, who I later learned was one of Dad's poker buddies, sent another letter claiming my decision to terminate services had caused public humiliation and significant financial loss. He even threw in some inflated numbers for the supposed value of the event decorations and catering services. The best part? The letter also accused me of being malicious and vindictive for taking down the decor during the event. The plaintiff's family was subjected to public embarrassment, it read. The abrupt removal of event services tarnished the reputation of the hosts and caused irreparable harm to their social standing. I couldn't stop laughing as I read it. Denise was genuinely trying to paint herself as the victim in a scenario she'd entirely created. The irony was so thick you could cut it with a knife. My lawyer, however, was far less amused. "They're trying to throw mud at the wall and see what sticks," she said during our next call. "Their entire case hinges on the idea that you violated the contract, but the clause you invoked is ironclad. We'll respond formally, and I'll make it clear that pursuing this further will only waste their time and money." The legal back and forth dragged on for about 2 weeks. Denise and Dad kept pushing, likely because their lawyer didn't have the guts to tell them they had no chance of winning. Meanwhile, my lawyer was working behind the scenes to compile all the evidence we needed to shut this down for good. We had everything: the original contract signed by Claire, which clearly outlined the termination clause, witness statements from my staff, who had been present when Denise's hostile comments were made, and the piece de resistance, security footage from the venue. The cameras had captured everything, including Dad's drunken tirade and Denise berating my team. When the footage was brought to their lawyer's attention, the case crumbled almost instantly. My lawyer sent a final letter, laying out the evidence in excruciating detail and warning them that if they continued to pursue the matter, we'd countersue for defamation and legal fees. 2 days later, I got an email from my lawyer. They've dropped the case. No further action required. The most surprising fallout, though, came from Claire's new husband, Adam. He called me a few days after the wedding. I almost didn't answer, but eventually, out of curiosity, I picked up. "Hey, Matt," he said, his tone awkward. "I know Claire wants to talk to you," he continued. "She feels terrible about everything. She's just, I don't know, scared." She's stuck between you and Denise, and it's tearing her up. I sighed. I get it. But if she wants to talk, it has to come from her. I'm not going to chase her down. I'll tell her, he promised. I hung up, feeling strangely hopeful. Maybe Claire and I still had a chance to mend things. Maybe not. Either way, I'd finally stood up for myself, and that was a win in my book. A few weeks after the chaos settled, I got a text from Claire. Hey, can we meet up? I feel like we need to talk. I stared at the message for a long moment, unsure of how to feel. On one hand, it was Claire reaching out. The same Claire who had stayed silent while Denise and Dad humiliated me at her wedding. The same. Claire who had watched my company, the company I built from nothing, get insulted and then didn't say a word as I walked out. On the other hand, I couldn't shake the nagging doubt. What did she want from me now? Was this an actual olive branch, or was she just here to smooth things over for her own sake? Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her. Sure, I replied. Let me know when and where. We met at a small cafe, one I used to go to back when I was starting my business. It was neutral ground, but I couldn't help but feel tension in the air as I walked in. Claire was already there, sipping a coffee. She looked up and smiled, an awkward forced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Hey, she said, gesturing for me to sit. Hey, I replied, taking the seat across from her. There was a long pause before she spoke. I'm really sorry about everything that happened at the wedding, she began. It got so out of hand, and I know Denise and Dad said some things they shouldn't have. I raised an eyebrow. Some things? She shifted uncomfortably in her chair. Okay, a lot of things. But you have to understand, they were stressed. Weddings are a lot of pressure, and emotions were high. It wasn't personal. I let out a bitter laugh. Not personal, Claire. They called me an embarrassment. They mocked my business, belittled me, and basically told me I shouldn't have been there. How is that not personal? She sighed, as if I was the one being unreasonable. Look, I'm not saying what they did was right, but you pulling out the way you did wasn't fair either. You ruined the reception, Matt. People are still talking about it. There it was, the real reason she wanted to talk. So, this isn't about what they said or did, I said, my tone icy. This is about how it made you look. That's not what I'm saying, she replied quickly, though the defensive edge in her voice told a different story. I just think you could have handled it differently. You didn't have to punish everyone because of what Denise and Dad said. I stared at her, trying to decide if she actually believed what she was saying or if she was just parroting Denise's narrative. Punish everyone? I echoed. Claire, they hired my company. They insulted me, the owner, in front of everyone. They didn't even bother hiding their disdain. You expect me to just stand there and take it? I expected you to think about someone other than yourself, she shot back. This wasn't about you. It was my wedding. Do you know how humiliating it was when everything fell apart? People were asking me what happened, and I didn't know what to say. I had to deal with the fallout while you just walked away. I leaned back in my chair, stunned. So, that's what this is about. Not what they did, not how they treated me. It's about how it inconvenienced you. That's not fair, she said, her voice rising slightly. I'm trying to fix this, but you're making it impossible. Fix it? I repeated. Claire, you haven't once acknowledged what I went through. You're sitting here blaming me for standing up for myself, because it didn't fit into your perfect little wedding narrative. Do you even hear yourself? She crossed her arms, her expression hardening. Maybe I wouldn't have to say this if you hadn't made everything about you. I invited you to the wedding because I wanted you there. I was trying to include you, but you turned it into a disaster. I felt a sharp pang in my chest, but it wasn't sadness. It was clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. Claire wasn't stuck between Denise and Dad. She was just like them, entitled, manipulative, and incapable of taking responsibility for her actions. I stood up, tossing a few bills onto the table to cover my coffee. You know what, Claire? I'm done. With you, with Dad, with Denise, all of it. I've spent my whole life being the scapegoat for this family, and I'm not doing it anymore. Her eyes widened. Matt, wait. No, I said firmly. You don't get to rewrite this. I came to your wedding because I thought maybe things had changed, but all I got was the same disrespect I've dealt with my whole life. And now you're sitting here blaming me for having the audacity to walk away from it. I'm done, Claire. For good. She sat there, stunned, as I walked out of the cafe. That was the last time I spoke to Claire. She sent a few texts in the days that followed, but I didn't bother responding. There was nothing left to say. She'd shown me who she really was, and I believed her. As for Denise and Dad, I cut them out of my life completely, and it was the best decision I'd ever made. In the months that followed, my company thrived, thanks in part to the wave of new clients who'd been impressed by how professionally my team handled the wedding fiasco. Denise and Dad might have tried to tear me down, but all they did was make me stronger. And Claire, she became just another part of my past. I stopped wondering if she'd ever see things differently because it didn't matter. Family isn't about blood, it's about respect. And none of them had shown me any, and honestly, I don't regret a thing.